We are good to go.
All right, thank you, Brendan. Welcome to the June 12th, 2023 meeting of the CB6 Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee. My name is Reshma Patel, and I am chair of this committee. Tonight, we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. The meeting is called to order at 6:34 p.m. As a reminder, New York state law now requires all community board members to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If the camera is not on and your name is not properly displayed, you cannot count towards quorum. Members of the public, you may raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there is time following this committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. We do not have a volunteer to take minutes tonight. We need someone to take minutes. If you are able to take minutes, please raise your hand. This is not going to be that long a meeting. If we can just have somebody take minutes, that would be great. And also, I just want a reminder, because in the meetings from the last month, were more detailed than they needed to be. We are asking just a brief overview.
Hannah raised her hand.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Brendan, for pointing out. I did not see the hand raised. So Hannah, thank you so much for volunteering. We will now take attendance by roll call. Brendan, will you conduct the roll call?
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Jim Collins.
Present.
B. Disman. I do not see B.
Excused tonight.
Okay, so B is excused. Ned Kalani.
Present.
Ava Marie Lassiter. Okay, she does seem to be having camera issues, but I do see her, so she is counted as present.
Present.
Yep. Steve O.
Present.
Reshma Patel.
Present.
And Hannah Singleman.
Present.
Okay, and with that, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Brendan. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Brendan, let me know if I'm missing anyone. I'm looking through just to see if I see any hands. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is approved. The minutes from the May meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no hands, the minutes are adopted from the May 8th, 2023 meeting of Manhattan Community Board 6 Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee. In order to conduct an efficient meeting tonight, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be alert us of any technical difficulties you're having or to state inviting information, like an email address that has already been stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. Committee members are required by the state open meetings law to have their Zoom cameras on and your first and last name displayed during tonight's entire meeting. From call to order to adjournment, if you must step away from your computer briefly, you are required to leave your camera on. Tonight's agenda. We're going to have updates from the Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee members, which is all of you, on budget request discussions with other committees, and then the chair's report and old or new business. So, I will start off. In addition to serving on this committee, I serve on the Parks Committee. And I spoke to the chair of the Parks Committee. I had wanted it to be an agenda topic, budget discussion, but it didn't happen for various reasons at this June meeting. But we are speaking in the next 2 weeks and discussing budget requests for Parks. Parks has the most requests, and you know, that is probably going to be the most detailed. I also reached out to all the other committee chairs, which I have been doing since February, and have not gotten any substantial updates. So I will, let anyone else who may have had a conversation and in their other committees, so we can move on with the budget. Does anybody have any information to share on the Airtable updates?
I see Ned has his hand raised.
Sure, Nat?
I actually don't have any updates, but I reached out to my chair. I think what I'm going to do, at least for mine, is I'll just bring it up on the next, sort of older new business part of the meeting, just to get some thoughts from the rest of the committee there. I don't have any updates right now.
Thank you. And if you can, what other committee are you on, Nat? Just so everyone
Housing
knows.
and homelessness.
Housing homelessness. And actually, for everybody who is on this committee, it would just be great to just know. So Hannah, I'll just go to you next. I'm just looking at the boxes here. What other committee do you serve on?
I am on Health and Human Services, but what specifically should I can email LV, but what specifically are we asking for her to look at the Airtable? Or I was just unclear on exactly the outcome we wanted, but I can email her.
Oh yeah, so in the email that I had sent around, there's a link to the Airtable, and in the Airtable, we have what was submitted last year. And what we want is for the committee chair to tell us if they need to change it or if they want to keep it there.
Okay.
And each of the committee chairs has received an update from me with the report that we got back from OMB saying if the request was funded from last year or not. And that Brendan has updated in the Airtable. So everything there is the most current. Now, usually what happens on the committees that I'm part of, Parks Committee, we actually have it as an agenda item and discuss it as a group. So every committee member then has input on it. And so to the extent that NAD, what he suggests that he's going to do is bring it up as old or new business is also an option. Or in my case, I was going to bring it up that way, but I had spoken to the committee chair in advance just to make sure, because there's only a certain amount of allocated time for a meeting. And so he had requested that we keep it for a future meeting and have a separate discussion prior to that. And I'm happy to have a discussion with anybody about this over the summer. It's just that a lot of the committees don't meet over the summer. So I just wanted to get it done, sooner than later, because then September will be very busy because we have a public meeting on the budget in September, and then we have everything by the end of October. Steve, what other committee are you on?
I'm on the Public Safety Committee.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, and public safety.
Mhm.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I was going to say public safety generally actually doesn't have that many requests because it is a relatively new committee.
Yeah, so there were originally 2. We
Yes.
did get a response back, but they weren't, funding not clear. Oh, all right, you're bringing it up.
Brendan.
They both are for security cameras for 2 respective parks in our district, and they talk about the funding is something that the elected officials manage. We did add a new one, that's number 3, providing Department of Homeless Services to provide security at homeless shelters in the district. But I want to say 3 or 4 of the public safety meetings were centered around shelter security, predominantly over the 45th Street Women's Shelter, which exhibited the exhaustive nature from the 17th precinct, managing, responding, addressing all the needs from what happened there. There was also a terrible incident that occurred at the 45th Street Women's Shelter, which exhibited a strong need for shelter security who are there in 1 degree away and have arrest capabilities. So we see this as a potential need since we spent a great deal of time on one shelter. We only see the needs of the unhoused increasing. That this will be something will be a conversation I'll expand to other facilities. So this was a new thing that we added. And I don't believe this has received a response yet, but the other two were just pretty blanket responses referring to the local elected officials holding the budget for camera security at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza and one at Bellevue South Park.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, so this is a new request, and those other two, especially the Dag Hammarskjöld, has been a request for some time, and we will reach out to our elected officials again. I mean, there has been some back and forth as to who is actually the source for funding for these, but we will talk to our city council member as well as, you know, if state senator or state assembly people can also, maybe there's some funding available.
Just to double click on the third one with the Department of Homeless Services providing security. We did request an audience from someone to represent DHS at several of our meetings, but multiple conflicts, we were unable to have anyone speak on their behalf. So just something that is because it took a great deal of public safety meetings. I think it's also would be interesting if we get a response or representation from DHS to respond to this budget request.
Thank you. Eva Marie, what other committee do you serve on?
I don't
Eva
serve.
Marie's a public member.
I'm a public member,
Okay.
and I serve on this committee.
Yes, I apologize. I forgot that. I did know that. And so then, Jim, what other committee do you serve on? And
Land use.
And did you have any discussions on the Airtable budget request with?
I
land
have
use committee?
not. Not that I recollect. No, I don't think we've discussed it at all. And I don't know traditionally whether or not we actually do many. I mean, I don't recollect that we've ever put much of a budget request in. I'd have to go back and check, but I mean,
Yeah, so
we
I mean,
don't
yeah,
necessarily. I think the only thing that might be asking for is that crossover at 24th Street over to Riverside. That, and I'm not even sure if that's us or transportation. That's all I reckon.
no, thank you, Jim. Right, land use historically has not had that many requests. We have our table on here presented, but it's just that we ready.
Yeah, what's on there now? Can you refresh my memory? I'm working from my phone right now.
Yeah. The land use. So it's actually the bridge on East 25th Street, if I read correctly. I'm also on my phone. Yeah.
That's the one I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
And that actually has allocated for it, but we do not take anything off our Airtable budget request until it has been fully funded and completed.
Right. But I don't think there's anything else on there, is there?
The continued construction of the Esplanade.
Oh, yeah. Right, because that's waterfront. I don't, that's more, I'm not all that attuned to waterfront issues as I am inland issues. All right, that's fine.
And it has also. Okay, thank you, everyone. And I, as I mentioned, I will be reaching out to committee chairs again, but also in September at your next meetings, unless you have a meeting sooner than that, certain committees do meet over the summertime. do bring up this topic. Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
I see Steve has his hand raised.
Hi, Steve.
The blurb from not the blurb, the response, I'm sorry, the response for the construction for the continuous Esplanade shows that it's funded, but it mentions that it looks like the ball's in our court, that we as the community need to reach out to the respective agency. Is that right? Or did I read that wrong?
No,
I
you are.
think so the agency response, just interject, and sorry for not raising my hand, but the fiscal year 2023 response says the community board should contact the agency. The current year response, which is fiscal year 2024,
Okay.
says that the project has been fully funded and the preliminary design contract has been let. Hopefully that clarifies things.
Mixing up the fiscal years. Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, no worries. It's actually because we have to put so much in the table. It's a understandable mistake. And as I mentioned before, we don't take anything off until we actually see the project fully funded. So that's why it's still there. So, the only other thing I'll mention is because we did mention, getting a speaker for DHS at public safety. We had on our agenda for this meeting, a discussion with the different agency heads and a representative from OMB who handled the budget request so we could improve our process, which is what we talked about at our May meeting. But unfortunately, given that the city's budget, deadline is June 30th, and it's just a generally busy time for a lot of the people who are dealing with these budget requests, we did not get a positive response for anyone who could attend, but they have said that they were happy to speak to us over the summertime. Now, we don't have a meeting over the summertime, so it will be an informal discussion with them. And hopefully at some point, perhaps we could have a panel discussion and just talk a little bit more about how the budget requests get processed by OMB and the different agency liaisons. Anybody who would like to be a part of these conversations as they happen, if they happen over the summer, you're welcome to tell me, and I'm happy to include everybody, but I'm not gonna force everyone to have to get on a call to, do that.
I see Steve's hand is raised.
Steve?
Sorry, I missed that. Is that the OMB being doing the presentation or a specific agency?
So we asked OMB, we asked Parks, and we asked DHS. We reached out to several different agencies as well as
kind of breaking up, or is that me?
Oh no, I don't know if you heard me. So we reached out to OMB, the person who handles or budgets from OMB. We reach out to them as well as the agency who respond to our budget request, which along with the Airtable, we have a written response that we give, and then we have a written response that comes back. And in that written response, which I think I shared probably with everybody, or Brendan shared with everybody sometime February, March, there were people listed there as the contact, and those are the people we reached out to.
Thank you.
And so in addition to this, when we make the submission in October, we update the Airtable. We put everything in Airtable because it's easier to manage, but there is this much larger community needs statement that we submit, which is a text and describes each of these projects that we want funding for. And, all the requests, it doesn't come directly from our committee. They come from each of the various committees of Community Board 6. But what we as a committee do is prioritize them, see what's, relevant, and then create the submission. Any other questions? Anybody have anything for old and new business?
Reshma?
Yes,
I forget whether there was something Nad wanted to say in old or new business. I think it was Nad.
sure. Now,
Sorry, no, that was, Brett, that was for my other one where I'm gonna bring up like budget requests. I'm gonna bring that up in the old and new business at the housing and homelessness meeting, but nothing for this meeting. Unless I'm missing something, but
okay, and then I see I see that there are some comments in the chat. Welcome, Jerry, or the questions in the Q&A. Okay, I see you addressed the. Okay.
Reshma, you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. I maybe move the phone closer. I was just looking at the Q&A, but I see that you've addressed it. I was just trying to make sure that there's no other open questions in the Q&A. Am I still breaking up?
No, you're not.
Okay. All right, so seeing no other issues here, I can have a motion to adjourn.
Motion
Can
to
I just
adjourn.
address a quick matter of new business since we're
Oh, sure.
budget and governmental affairs?
Sure.
And I wish I knew the agenda was short, but I thought the budget would take longer. I apologize.
No, not a problem. We had I mean, it's mostly because we didn't get the updates, right? So we don't have anything
Okay.
to.
As you all know, the city just passed a law to impose mandatory composting within the city. And matter of fact, I just took care of our composting because they only pick up on Mondays within my neighborhood. What I would propose or suggest is that the Budget Committee draft a resolution ensuring that the city arrange for financing of at least 3-day-a-week composting. And the reason for that is or particularly in the lower income neighborhoods where buildings aren't as secured from vermin and cockroaches and what have you. There's going to be a heck of a rat problem and mouse problem and termites and all the other stuff. So I would suggest if people have to keep composted food in their house for a week, particularly if you have young children, you can well imagine what that's going to look like, what it's going to be like. So I would suggest that we, as a committee, draft a resolution requesting at least a minimum of 3 days a week composting. So that's, I guess I'm raising that under new business.
Jim, thank you for that suggestion. I did see the notification that it got approved, and I haven't read the details of it. I also want funding for education on what exactly is composting for people, because I don't think everyone knows. And for a lot of buildings and the building staff, it may be put on, I mean, I don't know if it's the same way with recycling. Like if you don't recycle properly, you get fined. And I don't know if they'll do the same thing for composting, but people should know what to do. So those fines don't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that goes without saying, but
yeah,
the frequency, man, a lot of this is going to be DSNY just reallocating assets because they're not going to have as much food garbage.
yes.
But it needs to be done, I would guess, a minimum of 3 times a week. Because, stuff stinks after a while. And there's limits to how much you can fit within a freezer, and still, have your food and what have you. So if everyone is amenable, I'm happy to draft that resolution. It probably won't be available for this board meeting, but we can draft it and have the committee vote for it when's our next meeting? It's not until August, right?
September may have to be early August, depending on when the holidays happen, because we need to have a public meeting, and September will our budget. I have to look at the budget.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to draft a resolution if somebody wants to second what I've just proposed.
I will second it. I think it's a great idea, and thank you for raising it, Jim. And thank you for offering to write the resolution.
Very well.
Do
we have a vote?
Should we do a roll call vote, Brendan?
Yeah. So when I call your name, just say whether you're in favor or are opposed to resolution being drafted. Jim Collins.
Aye.
Nat Kalani.
In favor.
Ava Marie Lasser.
Aye.
Steve O.
This is for what? To draft a resolution to increase the compost collection?
Should have no. The city has passed mandatory composting as part of city legislation. So what this would do is require that mandate be met with sufficient funding to provide a minimum of 3-day-a-week composting. In other words, three day a week pickups for the compost. So you don't have garbage laying around in your apartment basements and what have you for the rats and the vermin to get to for, right now it's down there for a week.
Okay, so this is specifically for the Department of Sanitation to make sure they have enough funding for at least 3 days a week. Okay.
Composting, right. And as I say, most of it's going to simply be reallocating from regular garbage pickup to compost pickup, because the amount of garbage that's going to be food waste will be substantially reduced and instead be composted.
Sorry if I had an additional question. I had my hand raised earlier, but would Department of Sanitation items be something that would be covered under Environment and Parks, or would it fall under government and budget?
Well, this is a budget issue in terms of, making sure that it's funded sufficiently. So I would say.
I understand it's a budget issue, but the intricacies of composting and how the composting's been doing so far, the sign-up program, the data that's collected, its effectiveness, to the lengthy conversations of it, that seems not government and budget. And if, I'm all for composting, absolutely, but I don't have any data in front of me.
I just did it. That's why I broke up. I was doing my compost.
Yeah. So Steve, you make a really good point about questioning. Again, I see Jim's point that it's a budget issue, but also the governmental affairs part of our committee is always to kind of push for good government issues. But this is something that I will also bring up with the chair of the Parks Committee, because composting has been something that's been discussed in that committee. They have advocated for increased composting in the city, and it could be a joint resolution that we present.
With that, I'll support. Following that, I see some of the how the Parks Committee drafts it and some of the discussions they bring up. It just seems a little bit disjointed that the Government Parks Committee, the Government and Budget Affairs Committee is doing it. I understand it's a budget thing, but it just seems like there's a bit of a gap ahead of something that's Parks, Environment and Parks Committee. Sorry for the long questions,
No,
but I would
I
support
just want-
an increase in
I
budget.
just want,
you
yeah,
know.
the Parks Committee has discussed this, and we did have a resolution to request there be increased composting for the city. This was some time ago. This is finally passed. As you know, composting had stopped during the pandemic, and there has been a community movement, which Parks Committee has been involved in to try to get composting back.
Right.
I support it.
Right. Does that complete the roll?
Yes, no, it does not. Reshma and Hannah still need to vote. So Reshma
I am in favor.
and Hannah Singleton.
In favor.
Okay. Everyone, all
One
six
last thing,
committee-
I noticed down on the bottom of the Q&A, there's 7 bubbles.
Yes, so
From
I'm going to
apparently the
address that
public.
first. Yeah. So one, to backtrack in the future, when we're discussing an issue comes up, and I should have time for this, but we should have the discussion before we take the roll call rather than have the discussion during the roll call. So that's a procedural issue. But I did look at the Q&A. Some of the Q&A Brendan has addressed. So, Nathan Levy, thank you for attending the meeting and thank you for your questions. These questions are not actually germane to the conversation we're having now. If you could send an email to the board office, and as per some of these requests, they would go to another committee before coming to budget, as we've been discussing here, that the priorities get made from the other committees and then we aggregate it. And then in new business, it's only committee members who can bring up questions. Jerry, thank you for your comments. And, as we mentioned, that we are hoping that the city will do more education on compost. And then can we compost in community garden? So I think there is composting being done in some community gardens. Some of it stopped and is being restarted because it stopped during the pandemic. And there are certain buildings that have composting already. And learnings from the Staten Island project. I don't know if anyone has put a summary together or anything like that. It is not something that I have followed closely. I don't know if anyone else on this committee has.
Okay.
And in the smart bins, again, this was a conversation that has happened in the Parks Committee about the smart bins, and we've asked about this, and there are a limited number of those, but there are some that should be coming to our district. So thank you.
Excuse me, I have my hand raised. If I have a question.
Sure, Eva.
I just wanted to know, since Reshma, you mentioned that there was a resolution done with parks regarding composting. Should that part of that be incorporated in the draft of the resolution that Jim is talking about, which would deal more with the budget to accommodate those 3 days? Should part of the old resolution be at least reviewed so that Jim can then do the draft for the one that would be reviewed on, is that does involve the actual budget to increase it to 3 days?
So Eva, thank you for the question. So the Parks Committee had requested that we have more composting. And, all the resolutions are on the website, so Jim can take a look at it. But I think the next step is going to be, before Jim even starts drafting it, is I'm going to talk to Neil Barkley, who's the chair of the Parks Committee, and see if they want to have an involvement in this resolution, if they rather, they do it, if they want to do it as a joint resolution, and then get back to Jim on drafting.
Yeah. I'm happy to take the first stab at it. They can do it. We've got until what, September now?
Yep. September.
Right?
And
I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it for this month's board meeting. And I'm sorry, one other additional budget item. And I apologize again, this is new business. I'm a Republican. I live in a household full of Republicans, and we all got the city voters guide for primaries that we don't have, that we're not eligible to vote in. So it's basically a giant waste of money for the city. And it's just a flagrant instance of governmental waste, because they have to print it, they have to send it, yada, 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 yada. So I don't know who we would talk to about that, but one thing I always hate to see, particularly in a governmental entity, but anywhere, is waste. And this is pure and simple waste. I got four voter guides for myself, my wife, and my two sons. So if we can, I'm happy to draft another resolution to that effect, if you like.
So I would ask that we discuss this in the fall as opposed to right
All right,
now,
that's
because
fine.
it's too late for this election cycle. NYC Votes organization that sends these out. There may be a Republican primary in another district, and so they decide to send to everybody. I don't know how it
In
works.
another
but we
district, yes, right. In another district, and there's an easy way to do that. And there, you get targeted mailers from political campaigns all the time. And it stuns me. I mean, my building is also a lot of other Republicans, so everybody basically is getting this stuff, and it's there's probably enough to fill a waste basket, and just total waste. So yeah, it's something I think that should be addressed, and like I say, it's something easily targeted. Just this. Which districts are going to have a primary, and which ones don't. So don't screw around wasting money sending it to all of them. So, okay, that was my other budget item. See you later.
All right. Anybody else? Any other new or old business? All right, seeing no other hands up, someone needs to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Steve. So the meeting